Welcome to Women, Men, and Relationships. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. We're going to talk about the risk of following your inner voice, and I want to give you a way to practice hearing your inner voice and connecting to it. We have our next 30-day manifestation challenge coming up in June. So that'll be 30 days in June, and you can get signed up for that. It is free at jjflazanes.com/30-day. For those of you that are new, the Manifestation Challenge is a way for you to practice using the law of attraction and using practices that we will go over within the challenge to get your frequency and vibration to a point where you are more in alignment with and can hear some of what that inner voice and your intuition is trying to tell you. So today's show is with Erin Falconer. She's an author and digital entrepreneur. Since 2008, she has been the editor-in-chief and co-owner of Pick the Brain. Forbes magazine named Falconer's blog one of the top 100 most influential sites for women. Erin is also the co-founder of Leaf TV, a video lifestyle brand for millennial women. In 2015, Leaf TV was sold to publicly traded Demand Media, now trading as the Leaf Group. In 2017, off her blog, Erin launched the Pick the Brain podcast, which ranks consistently in the top 20 in the health and self-improvement categories on iTunes, and in 2018 was featured on the iTunes homepage. In 2018, she released the critically acclaimed self-improvement female empowerment book, How to Get Shit Done: Why Women Need to Stop Doing Everything So They Can Achieve Anything. Erin has been heralded as one of the most influential female voices online, designated one of the top digital entrepreneurs in Los Angeles by LA Confidential magazine, as well as being honored by Cadillac and Refinery 29 as one of the top 7 women changing the digital landscape for good. In 2014, the Wall Street Journal included Erin in their prestigious Women of Note. She has over 850,000 followers on social media. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited for us to get to know each other a little bit better. I know that I've been on your show. We've recorded something for your show, and I've heard some of your shows. And I'm really interested in your journey because it's not too many times that I'm meeting successful bloggers these days. Most of us podcasters are failed bloggers because we hate writing and we much prefer talking. So and your topic, Pick the Brain, is awesome because it's about growing yourself. And I thought between female empowerment and productivity and finding your voice, like you have a lot of great topics that definitely resonate with my audiences. And so let's go over your story a little bit about your blogging career and then leading into the podcast and how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So I am one of those overnight success stories that took about 17 years. And, that is to say that I took the very long and hard road to get to where I am today. And in a nutshell, I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada, very type A, academically inclined. And all the while I was out there getting A's and being valedictorian and all that type of stuff, I had this creative voice inside of me that was like, right. And it got to the point where it was so loud that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And when I was 16, I started doing stand-up comedy. I wrote comedy and performed it. And I continued on to do, to go to university, and was on the kind of eve of going to law school when I was like, you know what, this just doesn't feel right. I feel like I need to give this creative track a try. And I'm going to defer for a year and see if I can give it a go. Anyways, long story short, 8 years later, I found myself in Los Angeles with no money, no car. My visa was up, and literally I was in the fetal position crying on my bathroom floor being like, how did I get here? I should have been a successful lawyer, and here I am, broke, totally down and out with no options. And the scariest thing about that was not that I didn't have any money or all of that stuff. It's that I'd listened to this inner voice inside of me, and I thought that it had failed me. And when you have that moment, you're like, I just don't even know who I am, and I certainly don't know where to go. So I talked to a couple of people that I would, were mentors. And I said, I don't know what to do. I got to go back to Canada. Like I've got nothing here. And they said, you have to double down on that voice. And I was like, are you tripping? Look where I am, because I listened to this. Anyways, I got convinced into doing it. And I said, okay, I'm going to send out 100 job responses on Craigslist for any kind of writing job whatsoever. And if I get something, I'm going to take it and try and figure it out. So I got one response out of the 100 things that I sent out, emails I sent out, resumes I sent out. And it was a $15 an hour copywriting job at a self-improvement startup website. This is in 2008. So this is not the type of writing job I moved to Los Angeles for at all. But this was it. I take this job and make it count, or I go back to Canada. I decided that I was going to take this job and do whatever I can. I was going to get together a rock solid plan to turn this opportunity into something. And that's kind of what I did. So in 2008, I was very new to the self-improvement world. And I was very, very new, as were most people, to the startup world and to blogs. Blogging was very, very new. Personal blogging was very, very new at that time. I learned as much as I could about every aspect of the business. And from that, I was able to start Pick the Brain, actually partnered with the CEO of that self-improvement startup that I had originally been hired from. So Pick the Brain started out of nothing, but it was a very, very interesting time because nobody really knew anything about blogging. There were like 5 other self-improvement blogs. And so what we decided to do is all of the kind of new voices out there, we're like, instead of competing with one another, let's share each other's content. Let's share the tips and tricks we've learned and help kind of create this web and build each other up. And that's kind of what we did. And it really worked. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were just literally figuring it out as we went. Where I differentiated from the other 4 or 5 people in the space is that everybody else did personal blogs, and I decided that it was, for many reasons, better for me to have multiple voices on Pick the Brain. And so I started basically from day one with guest posting and having other people create original content for Pick the Brain. And out of that, Pick the Brain, I now have 400 people writing for me around the world, and was able to launch the podcast out of it. In between all of that, I also raised money for another company, which I've since sold to a publicly traded company in the tech space. And so it took years and years and years and years to get to where I am. And frankly, the landscape of blogging, as you know, as you kind of mentioned off the top, has really changed so dramatically that I feel lucky that I got into it when I did.
Absolutely. It's definitely divine timing when you're one of those first few people who are doing something and pioneering it, because the space isn't saturated yet.
Right.
And it's what's happening, unfortunately, with podcasts now, although unlike a blog where you can check a date and you can see, your SEO is going to be dependent upon how much you're putting out there and your keywords and all that good stuff. But you can be optimized and still be relevant on a blog without being like all the time, versus on a podcast. There's so many podcasts that start and stop, and they only have a few shows, or they they take their show down. So it's not, when it comes to podcasting as well, there were the few that got in early. There's everybody else who, to me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's about the long game when it comes to podcasting, just like blogging in terms of its success. So let's talk about your podcast and that transition for the podcast. When did you start the podcast version of Pick the Brain?
Oh, that was about a year ago. It was actually a year and a half ago, the end of September, early October 2017. So my other company that I referenced, that I built and sold, was a video company. We were the first, me and my partner were the first to create an e-commerce shoppable video. And so we created a ton of content for our own site, but also for YouTube. And I was, when I first started there, I was very, very excited about the space. And then just like you kind of mentioned, YouTube became so overpopulated, so hard to hear your voice. I was so frustrated that I was like, I was very happy when we sold, just because I was like, I'm over this. I'm going back to just exclusively the blog. And out of the blue, I got pitched to start a podcast. And a number of my friends around me had been like, Erin, you should do a podcast. And I was just so burnt out on from video. I was like, no, I'm doing the blog. Anyways, I got this very, very nice email from a guy in North Carolina who said, I'm a huge fan of Pick the Brain. I'm a huge fan of podcasts, blah, 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 blah. He laid out this entire plan and said, would you consider doing a podcast with me? And I was like, I guess. I mean, if you basically do everything and I show up and talk, like, yeah, we can, I'll let us leverage my audience, but I'm kind of burnt out and And so he convinced me into doing it. And I am so happy because the energy around podcasting is kind of like this new, fresh, exciting energy for me that like kind of existed at the beginning of my YouTube experience, definitely existed at the beginning of my blogging experience. But I just feel like everybody's so excited about the possibility of where podcasting could go. Obviously, it's already established and there are many out there, but I still do think relatively it is in its infancy. And so it is about the marathon here. And I am very, 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 very happy that Jeremy convinced me to give podcasting a try, because I'm just loving it. I'm loving hosting my own, co-hosting my own, and I'm loving just talking, like, for example, to you today. It's just such a nice format.
It really is. I'm a huge podcast fan of this medium for the reason of, for me, I do video as well. And I write, I've got 3 books, but I'm not like, writing doesn't bring me the same joy as the connection of you and I having a conversation and of being able to take it a little bit deeper. And when you write and it's so like on
Insular.
paper, right? And you have to really make sure you have everything perfect, and you can't have typos, and you have to have it researched, and you have to have it, if you reference something, an idea, you have to link it to something else if you want to be taken seriously. Versus on a podcast, I can have conversations with guests and I don't have to do any of that. Right. And I also, it links you with the kind of tribe that is interested in you without that. Like, it's already out there. It's like putting a product on a shelf where there's already millions of people walking by every day. And then that you're becoming in alignment with those that are actually the right audience, versus you trying to sell your stuff to somebody who isn't a right fit. But
I totally agree.
Right. But you don't know that. So, and I agree with you. I mean, Spotify just bought Gimlet for $2 billion or something. So, and I'll be working with Spotify here shortly in a different capacity. So I also agree that we're at the infancy stage of people are investing a lot of money in a podcast. So it is exciting time. So, but let's go back to your message and the mission of all of the work that you've been doing. You did the work, the copywriting work at the place for the empowerment or for the self-help. What did you want to write about that kind of stuff? What inspires you to focus on female empowerment, productivity, and finding your voice?
I hadn't really been exposed to classic self-improvement. That wasn't top on my reading list. But I did grow up in a household. My father is a psychiatrist. My mom is a psychiatric nurse. My stepmom is a psychiatrist. And so we had many conversations about psyche and mental well-being. And, Deepak Chopra was always around our house, and Eckhart Tolle, and those books were always lying around. I didn't necessarily read them, but they were kind of in my psychological periphery, if you will. And I was at such a dark place, as I kind of mentioned, when I got this opportunity, and I took it. It was self-improvement. That was the only, I took it because that was the only one that made me an offer. But again, it wasn't a coincidence. And so when I was throwing myself into this world, I really started to resonate and get help from a lot of the content that I was publishing or copywriting for the self-improvement startup was called People Jam, which was ultimately sold to a company called Chicken Soup for the Soul. But anyway, so I just found myself completely immersed in this world, and I was like, it empowered me so much. I was like, wow, there's really something to this. And so once something really works for you on that kind of base level, you know, it's kind of becomes part of who you are. And so now I have obviously a big self-improvement blog. I have my book, is called How to Get Shit Done, Why Women Need to Stop Doing Everything So They Can Achieve Anything. This is also a very, it's around self-improvement, mental well-being, and obviously female empowerment, and just about all of the lessons I've kind of learned along the way. And one of the biggest ones is that we as women really need to reframe what female productivity means, because it is not working for us. I think that the digital era is the big equalizer for women. It has taken away a lot of the traditional hierarchies, 9-to-5 hierarchies. It's created entire new industries such as blogging, and you know, you can monetize your Instagram channel or your profile. There are so many different things that you can do now that you couldn't do before, and all of these flexible structures really behoove women. The problem is we're just getting more and more done to free up time to get more and more done. And that is not sustainable, and it is not fun, and it doesn't make sense. And so, and that's kind of, I got caught in that trap, because once I had started rolling with Pick the Brain and then my other company, Leaf, and all that stuff, I just put my head down and didn't stop for a second to look up. And, you know, finally I had an epiphany where it was like, what am I doing? None of this makes sense. You know, I'm out there collecting trophies, but what's it all for? And so, yeah. Anyways, I then had to go back to some of the old and refresh myself on some of the old kind of classic teachings of, or tenets of self-improvement, and really tap into this larger idea of who I am, what I want, where am I, how did I get here, and where do I really, really want to go? And on my clock and on my schedule, not some weird antiquated idea of productivity, what productivity means, which is like getting the most you can possibly get done in a day, full stop. Because that stopped making sense for me.
Well, that's good that you caught it before it physically took you down, because that's what normally happens for women. They get physically run down with adrenal fatigue and depression. And usually there's some bit of either they're emotionally eating or their relationships are stressed out, and they just don't understand why that they're crashing.
Absolutely.
Because their physical body can't keep up the pace, because we aren't biologically built, women, to sustain that kind of putting out energy like men are. That's just part of our biology. So I love the book, How to Get Shit Done, Why Women Need to Stop Doing Everything So They Can Achieve Anything. I think that speaks to several different levels of some of the conditions that women would be very helpful to work on, which is the overgiving, the people pleasing, the looking for validation from everybody else, from saying yes to everything, to taking that multitasking part of who we are as women and almost overdoing it. And I think there's this guilt and, well, I can, so therefore I should. No, you can, but is it really the best idea for you? And learning how to say no and using discernment and creating balance is really where we're going to find our power.
Yeah, that's all in the book. In fact, I have an entire chapter on the word should and how toxic that word is. You know, because we are doing so much that we think we should be, or we've been told we should be. And that's helping somebody else's agenda move forward. It's not helping your agenda, personal agenda, move forward. So every time you're using the word should, you got to stop and say, why am I saying this? And should I? You know, should have question marks after them only. So yeah, and I totally agree. And I'm so glad you brought up the physical ramifications of this very go, go, go lifestyle, because I feel like that is women have to get to that level before they start to question, hey, what's going on? Like the chaos in their mind isn't enough. They just think that's the way we're supposed to be operating. And they do that until they all of a sudden, like, they're getting stomach aches, or they can't sleep at all, or they're, they're aching, or there's depression, or their anxiety is going up. And that starts to take a real physical toll. And that's usually when people go, wait, what's going on? But at that point, you're so far in it that it's much more difficult to get out.
So what was the defining factor for you then if it wasn't physical?
Well, the truth is that I was in the middle. We had just sold Leaf. We were acquired to a publicly traded company called Demand Media, which is now the Leaf Group. And so my partner and I on that, were brought over to this new company. We contractually were there for 2 years. And in that, right after we had sold Leaf, but I was still also with the company, I got hit up by this New York lit agent who said, Erin, we'd love you to write a book. So I was so excited, because this is the writing job I moved to Los Angeles for, right? It was not the $15 an hour copywriting job. So I was like, oh my God, yes, we set a time to talk on the phone. I cannot tell you how excited I was. I got on the phone and the agent said, we love what you're doing. We want you to write a book. We think it could be a big hit. Da, da, da. And I was like, amazing. I'm in. What should it be about? And she was like, well, it's you. The book would be about you. And I was like, I remember having this, like, I'd been kicked in the gut, and I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, you've done this and you've done this and you've done this and you've done this. And those are all pretty cool things. And I remember getting off the phone, and I was just like, I honestly so disappointed. Like, who would read this book? I don't understand. Like, who would read this book? And when I started to think about it and reflect on it that night, I was like, well, I have done this and I have done that and I have done this. It's not rocket science. Obviously, I haven't discovered the cure for cancer, but actually, wait, that is kind of impressive. And that is cool. And I noticed, I was like, wait, not only have I not taken the time to appreciate what I've done, I haven't even acknowledged it. What have I been doing? You know what I mean? I've been completely unaware of my life for the last 7 years. And so I slept on that. And then when I went back into my office the next morning, I looked around at some of the great inspirational women that I was working with, and I kind of watched them for the morning, and I was like, oh my God, like at about lunch, I was like, we are all suffering from the same disease here. We are just going. And as I said, it's what we're going to do is go right into a brick wall and waste this incredible opportunity of this, this digital era, this opportunity that we've frankly been waiting for since we've been around, you know what I mean? And so I was like, oh my God. So I had this epiphany about myself, and I was like, this is not cool. This is not right. And as I said, this is not sustainable. And so it was in that moment, it was kind of just this opportunity presenting it to myself, being presented to me, that made me kind of had this light bulb aha moment where I was like, oh no, this is not, I need to change something here. And so it's funny, because as I started to put the treatment together for the book, or the proposal, it was really like I was learning as I was writing it. You know what I mean? It's not like I was coming to it, at least at the beginning, like I was some expert on how to do this. It was like a real self-evaluation and self-discovery as I was putting together the proposal for this book. And so it was really a cathartic experience, and an eye-opening experience writing this book. And I'm happy with how it came out, because I think it is important. It's really important for women to get, to take the time to appreciate themselves, to value their time, and to find that inner voice that really starts to guide you in a way that's meaningful, and cuts through all of the shoulds of this world that are, specifically thrown at women.
So, okay. So it begs the question I have to ask, what's your birthday? Not the year, just the day and the month.
January 8th.
January 8th?
Yeah.
Oh, Capricorn.
Yeah. Same as Elvis and David Bowie.
And just like a Capricorn, to be able to rattle that off.
What are you?
I'm a Pisces.
Okay.
So even though you're a Capricorn and we don't know the rest of and maybe on your show, we'll do a little analysis of you. I hear, because it is partly a millennial thing, but it is partly energetic. for you that I hear that you think ahead. Like not everyone thinks ahead
Mhm.
and can see before something happens. That's me. My
Mhm.
whole business, it was based on that. I was worried about people's joints and making sure that their exercise wasn't going to harm them in the future, and wanted to start now while they were healthy and whole and keep their cartilage and not wear
Right.
them down over time. So, but see, I'm the weirdo oddball because nobody cares about that shit until they're injured. And then they're
Right.
like, oh, ow, it hurts to move. So can you help me now? Yeah, I can. But if I would have helped you 5 years ago, we wouldn't be here in the injured place.
Right. Right.
So it's that sort of foresight that not everybody has. And so that's why I was curious and why I asked you for your astrology sign, because it's somewhere in there would make a lot of sense to me. Capricorns definitely are they're you are the goat climbing the mountain to achieve that thing. There's definitely that drive. Capricorns absolutely do have sometimes a bit of a drive, whether it be in business or in sometimes like a stature of life, like having, like getting to some place, wherever that is, at the top of that mountain of that vista. So that could mean
Mhm.
financially, that could mean with a title or influence, that could mean with your family. So it can manifest in different ways. But I definitely I feel like I hear Sag in you, or something that's about foresight in a different way than just Capricorn. But we'll look at your chart on your show. So
Okay.
back to I really love what you said about the inner voice and about following that and really stepping into what we as women would be best to live, and not, and I actually did a whole show on the word should too. A long time ago I did a whole episode on the how violent that word is actually.
Wow.
Dr.
Yeah.
Marshall Rosenberg wrote Nonviolent Communication, and he talks about that should is the most violent word we use because
Hmm.
it indicates we don't have choice, and
Right.
we always have choice.
Mhm.
So with that said, what are some of the top lessons that you think you can impart upon the people that are listening to this today, in your journey when it comes to, again, that women's empowerment and just really living out and finding your voice?
Mhm. Yeah. So I think that first of all, every single person on the planet has an inner voice. Depending on how much chaos there is in your head, in your life, it is harder to tap into that, but it is certainly not impossible. And I think it is incumbent and responsible. You are responsible if you are interested in living a happy or fulfilled or energyful life, to tap into that inner voice. And so what does that look like? So that is being able to find calm and quiet space. For me, that's meditation. I know that doesn't necessarily work for, or feels daunting to some people, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be um, being very conscientious about just finding silence for yourself for 20 minutes, for taking a walk without your device, for being very, there are many ways to do that. I talk about those in different ways to do that in the book, but it is only through that silence and introspection that you can tap into that voice. And that is the thing that guides you to everything. Once you understand that, and once you can tap into that, you can start developing an idea of who you really are and what really makes you tick. And so that's when you can start crafting a plan about, exactly where you want to go. I talk about in the book about choosing 3 big buckets, one personal, one professional, and then one in a relationship. Those are just the 3 big ones that work for me. But then, so choosing those big goals that really mean something to you and would move the needle for you. And then what I suggest one does is do a 7-day time challenge, which is basically like a food challenge where you write down everything you eat for a couple days. I ask people to write down everything you do from morning to night for 7 days. And at the end of that 7 days, when you hold up that list of the 3 things that really matter to you, and then look at how you're spending your time, I think your jaw will hit the ground to see how far apart those 2 lists are. And the truth is, when you're not moving towards those 3 big goals and being conscious, and again, 3 is the number I chose. It could be 2, it could be 4. It's not, I'm not married to the number. But it is about being very selective about those goals. The truth is, when you're not spending most of your time working towards the big goals that matter to you, you're helping other people achieve their big goals. And that's why we become so depleted from an energy perspective, and then agitated, and ultimately then depressed and anxiety ridden, because we're really helping somebody else move the needle. And so I think it's just, well, my main takeaway is just about being very, very transparent and very honest with yourself about what you're doing. And that really means just literally writing things down, these observations, and then starting to pivot from there and get a plan together from there. But I am very, very keen on the idea of crafting a plan for yourself and putting it in black and white. For me, once you write it down, or type it, whatever, you start to become accountable. When you're living in your head, it's very easy to kind of float all over the place and not be specific and forget things. So yeah, it's about just getting real and then holding yourself accountable to these things.
I love that advice. That sounds great because I think 3 is very doable.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, like you said, 2. I wouldn't probably recommend anyone do more than that because, well, like you said, after they do the 7-day time challenge, they're going to be in shock to see how much time they're not putting into the things that they said were important to them or the things that would move the needle, and how much distraction that we all have. Now, with that said, there is the balance too, right? Of, because I'm a big fan of, I've got the Optimum Health and Avoiding Burnout checklist. So it's that, like, here's a perfect week and what it looks like: food, exercise, and all the different elements that you need to stay balanced in life and in work and in your body and in your health, and not to burn out and get to that place. So I'm a big fan of, like, if you're taking big chunks of time where you're not working on one of these 3 or 4 goals, that you're napping, that you're dancing, that you're having quality time with your partner, that you're
absolutely,
that you're doing, that you're reading a book that you love, that you're traveling to a foreign country or having an amazing experience somewhere, and you're fulfilling your cup, you're filling your cup with joy. So that to me would be, at least when you are spending time doing work, what is that? And especially if you're an entrepreneur, and if you're not an entrepreneur, but you're wanting to move towards having more of what it is you want, whatever that is. And I did a podcast with my partner last week, and one of the things that I sort of screamed about was this idea that people want things that they don't recognize they spend no time cultivating.
Exactly.
You can't say you want a better relationship and then you never work on it. Like, working on it isn't thinking about it. Working on it is reading a book,
correct,
class, going to therapy, doing a different practice, going to Tantra. Like, it's doing something different.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. They're like, oh yeah, I want more of that. Why can't I get more of that? I don't know. Are you doing
anything? You're not doing anything.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's just about also being hip to your behavior. And it's like, and once you start to really analyze it, you're like, yep, I'm talking and I'm not doing. And that's the big differentiator between people that really find fulfillment and again, have like an energy swell, are the people that take action and do around a plan. And by the way, I am the biggest proponent of relaxing that there is. What I say about that is that when you're going to relax, really relax. Don't like dive in front of Netflix. I love Netflix, but don't do it and then also have your phone and be scrolling your work emails. You're not doing either then. You're not really doing work and you're not really relaxing. Like, when you're relaxing, really lean into that and recharge and enjoy it and don't feel guilt about it. Do it. I take a nap almost every single day. I find the time because it recharges me, and it's like a 20-30 minute nap. But I'm not somebody that's like, I'll sleep when I'm dead type of mentality. That does not work for me. So you got to find what works for you. And if taking pauses or breaks or relaxing works for you, as it should, I highly recommend finding ways to get more of it in your life.
The people that say they'll sleep when they're dead usually die sooner anyway.
Right, exactly.
So, from all the chronic diseases that come with burnout and adrenal fatigue and not taking care of yourself, and probably the over caffeination and the overeating and drinking to numb all the emotions you're not willing to sit down and feel because you're too busy doing.
Right.
I'm not a proponent of the do for do's sake either.
Yeah.
In my world, it needs to be divinely inspired and timed, and have a creative impulse and be intuitively in alignment with who you are, what you want.
Exactly.
And then you take action. You don't just act because you have anxiety and you can't sit still. You actually have to be in alignment with the action. So that
your moral code and who you are and what defines you, all of those things, those actions need to represent that in some way or another.
So let's tell people how to get more of you, how to get your book, your podcast, and your blog.
My book is available on Amazon or it's basically available anywhere, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy books, my book is basically. And I am at Erin Falconer on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then for all things my blog, you can find me at Pick the Brain on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.
Great. And then it's pickthebrain.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast is Pick the Brain.
Yep.
Okay. So any other information, anything you want to leave listeners with to know about, to get from you, to be inspired by?
I feel like there's a lot of fear around sitting with yourself in silence, and there's a lot of hesitation. And I think that's why we are so, our schedules are packed 24/7, is because the idea, it's not even sometimes about getting more done. It's about the idea of just sitting with ourselves in silence for even 5 seconds is terrifying. And my advice is get over that fear as quickly as you can, because once you do it, the flip side is you'll never look back. And it is literally the key to crafting a life you want. So make you and finding that inner voice that we all have the number one priority in your life.
Absolutely in alignment with the message on all my shows all the time. So Erin, thank you so much for being a guest today. I hope that everyone checks you out on both your blog and more likely your podcast, because if you're listening to this, it's on my podcast. So you already are into podcasts. So go ahead and check out Erin's podcast as well and get her book.
Thank you so much, JJ.